Because unlike him, I'm not worthless. That line didn't just hang in the air. It hit like a hammer. My brother raised his glass, smirked, and got applause for it. My father nodded along, like the insult was somehow true. No one stopped him. Not my cousin Jeff, whose company I saved. Not my Uncle Phil, whose mortgage I covered. Not even Dad. Then they laughed again, louder this time, as my seat at the table might as well have vanished. What they didn't know? I'd already been quietly helping Forbes build their next cover story, and 3 months later, my face was on it. Let them laugh. The numbers will do the talking. They called me worthless. Now the world is about to find out what that costs. My name is Michael Carver, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning starts the same. Reviewing contracts at my kitchen table by 5 a.m., fresh coffee steaming beside stacks of meticulously organized ledgers. My younger brother Danny, Dad's new golden child, calls my careful approach boring, but I've built my company one clean deal at a time. My father Robert, once proud of my steady progress, now barely masks his disappointment when comparing my modest wins to Danny's splashy ventures. I've kept every receipt, logged every call, noted every promise my brothers made to Dad. Sarah Chen, that reporter I helped years ago, just made editor at Forbes. My tie feels tight as I button my suit for Dad's 60th birthday dinner. But let me start from the beginning. The restaurant's valet recognized my car but barely nodded as I handed over my keys. Through the glass doors, I could already see the party in full swing. Crystal glasses catching light, waiters weaving between tables with practiced grace. Dad had chosen LeBlanc, his favorite French place, where even the air felt expensive. You know that moment when you walk into a room and can tell something's off? The conversations didn't exactly stop, but they softened just enough. My sister-in-law Charlotte's laugh turned brittle. Cousin Jeff suddenly found his phone fascinating. "Michael," Dad called out, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. We were just getting to the speeches. I took my assigned seat, far corner, practically in the kitchen. The table settings probably cost more than my first car, but all I could focus on was Danny, holding court at Dad's right hand. He wore that smirk I remembered from childhood, the one that always meant trouble was coming. "Let me tell you about my big brother," Danny started, rising with his wine glass. The room hushed. I noticed Dad leaning forward, already grinning. Growing up, Michael was always careful. So careful. While I was out building relationships, taking risks, making things happen, he was counting pennies in his room. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. My hand stayed steady as I reached for my water. "But you know what?" Danny's voice dropped to that theatrical whisper he uses to close deals. "I learned something important from watching Michael. I learned exactly what not to do." More laughs now, stronger. Because unlike him, I'm not worthless. The word hung there like smoke. Dad didn't flinch, didn't defend me. Just nodded along like Danny had made some clever business observation. Aunt Marie actually applauded. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but kept my face neutral, the way I do during tough negotiations. Remember that feeling in grade school when the playground turns against you? That's what it was like. Watching faces I'd known for decades transform into an audience enjoying the show. My cousin Teresa, who I'd helped move 3 times, wouldn't meet my eyes. Uncle Phil, whose mortgage I'd quietly paid during the recession, suddenly needed to study his menu. I set my water glass down without a sound. The exit signs glowed green above 3 different doors. Force of habit, I always map escape routes. Nobody tried to stop me as I stood. In fact, the collective relief was almost tangible, like I was doing them all a favor by removing the evening's designated target. The drive home felt endless. Danny's words played on loop in my head, but not like a wound, more like evidence being cataloged. I'd spent years building everything brick by brick, contract by contract. My portfolio was solid. My books were clean. But perception matters in business, and Danny had just painted a target on my back. At home, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The clock read 11:43 p.m. I started drafting emails to every major client, scheduling Monday morning meetings to walk through our latest successes. By 1 a.m., I had a presentation ready showing 5 years of steady growth. Data doesn't lie. And I had mountains of it. Worthless. The word followed me into the bathroom as I loosened my tie. The mirror showed the same face as always, maybe a bit more lined around the eyes, but steady, determined. I thought about Sarah at Forbes, about the favor bank I'd built over decades of delivering exactly what I promised, about the careful records I kept of every deal, including Danny's. Will results speak before rumors do? I asked my reflection. The question hung there between me and the mirror, like a contract waiting to be signed. Back at my desk, I pulled up my calendar and blocked out the next 3 months. Every hour would matter now. I had built my company on patience and precision. Now those same qualities would help me protect it. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp, I'd start proving my worth. Not with words or excuses, but with execution. I hit send on the first batch of emails at 4:45 a.m. You know that perfect quiet before dawn, when the world feels clean and anything seems possible? That's when I do my best work. Always have. The messages were masterpieces of understatement. Just solid numbers laid out in black and white. 5 years of growth metrics. Client retention rates that would make Fortune 500 companies jealous. Delivery timelines met or exceeded on every major project. The kind of results that should speak for themselves. By 8 a.m., my coffee was cold and untouched. I kept refreshing my inbox, waiting for the usual morning responses. Most of my clients were early risers too. We'd built relationships on that shared habit, but the minutes ticked by, and the silence grew heavier. The first hit came at 10:22 a.m. A message from Danny to his network. I saw it because Teresa accidentally included me in a group chat. Concerned about some patterns I'm seeing, he wrote. Those who know. Due diligence matters. Vague enough to dodge libel, specific enough to plant doubt. I was still drafting a measured response when Westbrook Industries, our oldest client, sent their email. In light of recent discussions, we'd appreciate some verification materials. My stomach clenched, but I kept my hands steady as I forwarded them our complete audit history. Have you ever watched dominoes fall? Not the fun kind kids set up, but the kind that takes down everything you've built? By lunch, Market Share Solutions wanted third-party confirmation of our project outcomes. At 2 p.m., TechCore put their renewal on pause, pending what they called clarity. I sent over everything: audited statements, client references, real-time access to our performance dashboards. Hell, I even gave them virtual tours of our data centers. The truth was right there in pixels and profit margins, but Danny was always better at stories than spreadsheets. While I was compiling evidence, he was working the phones. Each time I checked social media, I saw more whispers, due diligence, smoke and mirrors, patterns. The same phrases, spreading like a virus through business circles. At 3:45 p.m., my phone buzzed. Riverpoint Technologies, terminating their contract effective immediately. The CEO didn't even call himself, sent his procurement officer to leave a voicemail. Given the circumstances, stepping back, wish you the best. 3 years of perfect service, erased by a few hours of rumors. I stayed at my desk until midnight, organizing documents for another push. Fresh comparisons showing our performance against industry standards. Case studies with verifiable references. Everything tagged, categorized, ready to deploy at first light. The walk from my office to my bedroom felt longer than usual. My apartment was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. Traffic sounds drifted up from the street. Horns, engines, life moving forward while my world shifted backward. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and lay down fully dressed. The ceiling became a projection screen for tomorrow's possibilities. Would Anderson Financial follow Riverpoint's lead? Would anyone even open my next batch of emails? Each car passing below felt like a timer counting down to morning. You did this to yourself, Danny's voice echoed in my head. Too careful. Too cautious. I turned to face the window, watching shadows play across the wall. The truth is, I wasn't careful enough. I'd forgotten the first rule of business. Perception shapes reality faster than facts can correct it. My phone glowed. 1:37 a.m. In less than 3 hours, I'd start again. Send new proof. Make new calls. But lying there in the dark, one question kept circling. Would morning bring another cancellation, or would it finally bring the first sign of recovery? The next week felt like trying to plug holes in a sinking ship with my bare hands. Every time I sealed one leak, 3 more appeared. Know what I mean? The kind of fight where you're so focused on surviving that you forget to check if you're even moving forward anymore. I spent hours screen sharing our project dashboards, walking clients through every metric, every milestone. The data was beautiful, clean, consistent, undeniable, but I could see their eyes glazing over on the video calls. Numbers don't mean much when doubt's already taken root. Perhaps we could set up additional compliance checkpoints. That became the new chorus. Everyone wanted extra verification, special audits, trial periods. I said yes to everything. What choice did I have? Even my most loyal clients were starting to fidget. Remember that old saying about trust taking years to build and seconds to break? I was living it in real time. Each morning brought a fresh round of just checking in emails that really meant, prove you're not a fraud. The spreadsheets grew heavier, more complex, as I tracked every penny and promise. That's when Mark Hensley's name kept floating to the surface of my thoughts. You know the type. Those seasoned professionals who've seen every trick in the book and can smell trouble before it hits the headlines. Mark had been my go-to advisor for years, the kind of accountant who treated ledgers like holy texts. I pulled up our cash flow projections on Thursday night. The numbers hit me like a punch to the gut. Between delayed payments and paused contracts, our runway was shrinking fast. Weeks, not months. The margin for error had evaporated. Danny's smirking face appeared on my LinkedIn feed. Another thought leadership post about due diligence and transparency. My finger hovered over the comment button. One public confrontation. But no. I closed the tab. Getting into a social media war would only validate the whispers. Clean books survive storms by staying boring and provable. The laptop chimed. Another payment delay notice from a Tier 1 client. In light of ongoing verifications, I answered with our standard documentation package. Patient, professional. Like this was all just normal business practice. Sitting there, watching responses trickle in slower and slower, the pattern became clear as crystal. Fear makes people hesitate. Hesitation gives rumors room to grow, and once those rumors take root, even your strongest relationships start to wither. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a notepad. Actual paper. Old school. Started writing names. People who understood numbers, who'd built their reputations on facts rather than flash. The list was shorter than I'd hoped. 5 names. Then 3. Finally, just one circled in black ink. Mark Hensley. The thing about asking for help? It's not just about what you need. It's about what you can still offer in return. I did a quick mental tally of the favors and trust I'd banked with Mark over the years. Clean audits, referrals, always taking his advice seriously. That had to be worth something. My hands were steady as I typed the email. Early meeting tomorrow? Need your eyes on something? Simple. Direct. The kind of message Mark would appreciate. His response came back in minutes. 6 a.m. My office. I shut down the laptop and let darkness fill my kitchen. The microwave clock blinked 11:42. 6 hours and 18 minutes until I'd know if my last real shot at survival was still in play. You ever notice how time moves differently in the dark? Each car passing outside became another client potentially slipping away. Every distant siren might as well have been Danny laughing. I poured a glass of water and watched city lights paint shadows on my wall. The question that kept circling wasn't about Mark or Danny or even Dad. It was simpler and scarier. Could clean books and honest work really outlast a dirty rumor? Because if they couldn't, if perception truly trumped reality, then everything I'd built my life on was about to come crashing down. 6 a.m. sharp. Mark's office smelled like fresh coffee and printer toner. That mix that always meant serious business was about to happen. He didn't waste time with small talk. Just gestured to the chair across from his desk and adjusted his wire-rim glasses. "Show me everything," he said. I pulled out my laptop, external drives, and access keys. Every ledger, every permission, every transaction record, no holds barred. You know what real professionals look like when they work. No dramatic gestures, no theatrical sighs. Mark just nodded and started methodically opening files. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this thousands of times. "Coffee?" he asked, not looking up from the screen. "Black," I replied, matching his tone. The next few hours blurred into a meditation of numbers. Mark worked through our books like he was reading Braille, feeling for inconsistencies, invoice by invoice, bank feed by bank feed. The quiet tap of his keyboard became almost hypnotic. Remember that feeling when you're in free fall and suddenly something solid appears? That's what it was like watching Mark work. The panic that had been screaming in my head for days settled into a manageable hum. "Interesting," he muttered around 9:30, highlighting a series of transactions. "What have you got?" He held up a finger. Wait. I'd seen that look before. Mark was following a thread, and he wouldn't speak until he was certain. Another hour passed. He started building a separate spreadsheet, color-coding entries. My leg wanted to bounce with impatience, but I forced myself to stay still. This was Mark's arena. Finally, he turned the screen toward me. "See these patterns?" I leaned in. He'd isolated a series of cash movements from entities I recognized. They were tied to Danny's operations, but the way the money moved. "These transfers," Mark continued, highlighting rows in red, They match up perfectly with some speculative positions I've been tracking. High-risk stuff. Way outside normal business operations. The timeline he'd built was damning. Danny hadn't just been talking big. He'd been systematically siphoning funds to cover increasingly desperate bets. And losing them. How long? I asked. Based on these patterns, at least 18 months. Maybe longer if we dig deeper. I felt my jaw tighten. 18 months. While Danny was playing golden boy at family dinners, he'd been burning through money that wasn't his. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying me. So, here's where we stand. Option 1. We disclose this now. Alert the proper channels. Get ahead of it. He paused. But that opens you up to questions too. Guilty by association. People might wonder why you didn't catch it sooner. I nodded. Option 2. We build this right. Take our time. Document everything. Create a package so bulletproof that no amount of spin can touch it. He tapped the screen. This is just the surface. Give me time, I'll find every thread. The trap was clear. Rush in with partial evidence and risk getting tangled in Danny's mess, or wait and build something undeniable. The answer was in Mark's steady gaze. Patience had gotten me this far. How long to build the full case? 3 weeks minimum. Doing it right. Do it. He started copying files to an encrypted drive, outlining what he'd need from me. By the time we finished, the sun was setting. I left his office carrying a drive heavy with exhibits and a clear plan. Say nothing now. Say everything when ready. The drive home gave me time to think. Danny would be expecting a reaction to his rumors by now. The silence would make him nervous. Maybe nervous enough to make mistakes. I pulled into my parking spot and sat there for a moment, watching lights come on in neighboring buildings. Who would blink first in this quiet war? Danny, watching for signs his sabotage was working? Or me, sitting on evidence that could bury him? Walking to my front door, I remembered something Dad used to say before he picked favorites. The best punch is the one they never see coming. You ever watch sand slip through an hourglass? That's what my savings looked like. Steady, unstoppable erosion. Every morning, I'd open the master spreadsheet and trim another non-essential expense. By week 2, I wasn't sure what qualified as essential anymore. Your operating costs are lean, Mark said during our daily check-in. That's good. Makes the pattern clearer when we show how Danny's entities were bleeding resources. I nodded, watching him add another layer to his evidence map. The wall of his office had become a digital spiderweb of transactions, each thread connecting to one of Danny's desperate plays. Mark had a way of making catastrophe look organized. The regulators will want to know about these gaps, he said, highlighting several dates where the money trail went fuzzy. We need to show where every dollar ended up. How long until we're ready? He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. 2 weeks to be bulletproof, maybe 3. I didn't tell him what my cash flow projection said about 3 weeks. Instead, I thanked him and headed back to my office. The sun had set hours ago, but I couldn't face the quiet of my apartment yet. Around midnight, I pulled up the master spreadsheet again. The numbers hadn't magically improved. At current burn rate, we'd hit a cash crunch in exactly 23 days. All the clean books in the world wouldn't matter if we couldn't keep the lights on. I rubbed my eyes. And that's when I remembered Sarah. 6 years ago, she'd been a hungry reporter working on a story about startup accountability. Her editor had killed her original source at the last minute, and she'd called me in a panic, needing verifiable data and a quote before dawn. I'd stayed up with her, walking through our transparency protocols, explaining how real growth leaves a paper trail. She'd gotten her story, earned a promotion, and sent me a thank you note I still had somewhere. Wonder where she ended up? I dug through my archived emails until I found our old thread, clicked her name. And there it was, in her updated signature block. Sarah Chen, managing editor, Forbes magazine. My hands got steady the way they do when everything hangs on doing something exactly right. I opened a blank email and wrote, Sarah, hope this finds you well. Saw your recent promotion. Well earned. I'm building something unique. A case study in transparency and resilience under pressure. All books open. All metrics verified by third parties. Might interest Forbes readers who value substance over flash. Happy to provide full access if you're curious. Best, Michael. No begging. No hint of desperation. Just facts and an open door. I read it 4 times, checking each word. Then I hit send before I could overthink it. The city had gone quiet outside my window. That deep nighttime quiet, when you can hear your own thoughts too clearly. I started gathering my things to head home. My phone lit up. New email from Sarah Chen. My throat went dry. Know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of something big, but you can't tell if it's a cliff or a launch pad? I picked up the phone, then set it face down. Took 5 slow breaths like I used to do before client pitches. 1. Just get oxygen to your brain. 2. Whatever it says, you've got options. 3. She remembers you or she wouldn't reply this fast. 4. Focus on what you can control. 5. Ready. I turned the phone over. Subject. Interesting development. Let's talk. Free tomorrow 9 a.m. EST. We'll send conference line. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode if handled wrong. A door had just opened. I had no idea where it led, but right now, any path forward felt like hope. 9 a.m. sharp, I was squared up to my webcam, tie straight, coffee steaming just out of frame. You know that moment before a big pitch when your mouth goes dry but your mind gets crystal clear? That was me, waiting for Sarah's face to appear on screen. The call window blinked, and there she was. Same analytical eyes I remembered, but now with an editor's confidence behind them. "Michael," she said, smiling. "Been a while. Still starting your days at dawn? Some habits stick." I returned her smile, thinking of those early morning calls years ago when she was fact-checking her stories. "Thanks for making time. Show me what you've got." I shared my screen and walked her through our operational dashboard. Every metric pristine, every trend line documented. 6 years of steady growth. Client retention rates that made our sector averages look sick, and profit margins that proved we weren't buying revenue with discounts. "Clean books," she said after 20 minutes. "But that's table stakes. What else?" I switched to our real-time monitoring system. Full transparency. Every transaction tracked, every deviation flagged. "We built this when—" "Michael," she cut in gently. "The numbers are solid, but Forbes readers want more than spreadsheets under glass. They want to see how businesses handle pressure. Real pressure." My stomach tightened. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Show me resilience. Show me you can grow when everything's trying to shrink you. Show me anti-fragility, getting stronger because of stress, not despite it." She leaned forward. "Do that in the next 3 months, and you've got your cover story." 3 months. The deadline hit like a hammer, but I kept my face neutral. "Specific metrics in mind? You tell me. Set ambitious targets, then beat them. But remember," she held up a finger, "every claim needs to be traceable. No gray areas." "Understood." I felt my pulse steady as the challenge crystallized. This wasn't just publicity. This was vindication through execution. "When do we start?" "Clock's already ticking. I'll need progress updates every 2 weeks, final review at 90 days. She paused. This could be exactly what both of us need. But if the story's not there, it'll be there. After Sarah signed off, I called Mark. He listened without interrupting, then said, "We need a scoreboard. Weekly targets, everything documented. How fast can you build it? Give me till tomorrow morning." "But Michael," I heard him choosing his words carefully. 3 months is tight. It's what we've got." I spent the next 4 hours mapping prospects, ranking them by 2 criteria: how quickly they could say yes, and how immune they'd be to whisper campaigns. Old contacts who valued results over rumors. Partners who'd seen our systems up close. Mark's scoreboard arrived in my inbox at dawn the next day. He'd broken the 90 days into weekly sprints, each with revenue targets, client acquisition goals, and operational metrics. At the bottom, he'd added a note: "Every claim traceable. No exceptions." I printed the scorecard and pinned it above my desk, writing the deadline in heavy black ink. 90 days. Looking at those 2 words, I felt the future compress into a single, non-negotiable window. You ever notice how a deadline can change the way time feels? The clock in my office had kept the same rhythm for years, but now each tick sounded like a footstep getting closer. I blocked my calendar into tight segments: prospect calls before 9, client updates until noon, documentation and follow-ups until 3, strategy review until close. Every minute had to count. The daily huddle schedule went up next. 8 a.m. status check, 4 p.m. obstacle clearing, 9 p.m. final numbers. No drift, no gaps. I stared at the deadline again, doing the math I'd already done 20 times. 13 weeks. 91,000 minutes. Each one a chance to build proof or lose ground. Sleep was going to be a luxury I couldn't afford much longer, but that was fine. I'd gotten used to quiet offices at midnight, and now those extra hours had a purpose. Every morning would bring us closer to either a cover story or a closure notice. I set my first round of prospect calls for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Time to see who still answered their phone before normal business hours. I've always believed complexity kills deals. You know what I mean? The more moving parts you add, the more places things can break. So when Mark and I sat down to design our recovery plan, We stripped everything down to basics. What if we bundled the core services? I suggested, spreading our offering sheets across his desk. Make it dead simple to understand, price, and implement. Mark adjusted his wire rim glasses, studying the numbers. Shorter sales cycle could help. How much fat can we trim? From discovery to contract? Half. I tapped our standard timeline. No more 6-week evaluation periods. They either see the value in 10 days or we move on. Remember those old subscription packages that needed a lawyer to decode? We killed those. Created 3 clear tiers, each with fixed deliverables and guaranteed outcomes. The kind of thing you could explain to your boss in an elevator ride. Mark worked his network like a master fisherman. He knew exactly which investors valued steady cash yield over flashy projections. These weren't the cocktail party crowd my brother courted. They were the quiet money folks who actually read balance sheets. Got us a meeting with Harrison Capital, Mark said one morning, sliding a folder across my desk. They're old school. Love boring businesses that actually make money. I nodded, already scanning their due diligence checklist. When? Tomorrow, 7 a.m. They start early. Perfect. But our real breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Fear itself. See, we'd lost too many deals to whisper campaigns. So we designed something new. Partnership agreements with mutual penalty clauses. If either party pulled out based on unproven rumors, they paid. Heavily. You should have seen the first prospect's face when we explained it. So you're that confident in your delivery? Confident enough to put skin in the game, I replied. Question is, are you? They signed within the hour. The wins started small but steady. Midwest Manufacturing came on board with a 2-year commitment. Then Pacific Dynamics signed our premium tier. The following week, Harrison Capital wired a bridge investment that pushed our runway well past the second milestone. Mark raised an eyebrow when he saw the numbers. Market's noticing. Your brother's crowd is getting nervous. Let them sweat, I said, focusing on implementation documents. We deliver first, talk later. The Forbes editor, Sarah, kept a close eye on everything. Her weekly data requests were surgical. Raw performance metrics, anonymized contracts, compliance certifications. No fluff, no spin. Looking solid, she commented during our third update. But remember, we're tracking resilience, not just recovery. Understood. I sent her our latest stress test results. Every new partnership's designed to strengthen under pressure. That first month nearly broke me, though. I'd forgotten what 18-hour days felt like. My apartment became more of a pit stop than a home. Shower, change, coffee, repeat. But our scorecard showed green across the board. Revenue up 12%, churn down to near zero. Operating margins expanding. Mark caught me dozing at my desk one night around 11. Big call tomorrow with Platinum Ventures. Get some real sleep. I rubbed my eyes, staring at the investor brief. Platinum could be our ace. They had the capital and connections to close our milestone 2 gap in one shot. But their due diligence was legendary. They'd dig into every corner, question every assumption. I'll sleep when we're funded, I said. But Mark wasn't having it. You'll sleep now. Because tomorrow, they'll smell desperation if you're running on fumes. He shut my laptop. 4 hours minimum, non-negotiable. He was right, of course. The Platinum call would test more than our numbers. It would test our confidence. One hint of doubt, one hesitation on a hard question, and they'd walk. Standing in my kitchen at 5 a.m., waiting for the coffee maker to finish, I ran through our preparation one more time. Clean books, growing revenue, defensible moats. But would it be enough? When they started their deep dive, my phone buzzed. Mark, heading to the office early to do one final review. Dawn was just breaking outside my window, painting the city in shades of promise and doubt. Time to find out if we could convert preparation into proof. The Platinum Ventures term sheet landed in my inbox at 11:43 a.m. I printed 3 copies, signed each one with steady hands, and sent them back by noon. No victory dance. No celebration. Just straight into the next task. Time was too precious for anything else. You know that feeling when you're running flat out and your lungs are burning but you can't slow down? That was us. We compressed our old 6-week onboarding into 5 days. When clients asked how, I'd just say, because we have to. The truth was that simple. Mark became our quality firewall, reviewing everything with that accountant's precision of his. He'd initial each verification report like he was signing his reputation away. Which, in a way, he was. Sometimes I'd catch him squinting at his screen past midnight, cross-referencing data points most people wouldn't even notice. Your brother's crowd would hate this level of scrutiny. he said one evening, not looking up from his monitor. That's exactly why we're doing it, I replied, updating another milestone tracker. Sarah from Forbes didn't make it any easier. Her mid-cycle check-in came with the kind of questions that keep CEOs awake at night. I need to see more than a lucky streak, she said during our video call. Show me why this growth sticks when the adrenaline wears off. I shared my screen and walked her through our retention metrics. 98% and climbing. Then I pulled up the SLA performance logs. Every deliverable tracked, measured, and exceeded. We're not selling dreams, I told her. We're building systems that work better under pressure. But let me tell you something about pressure. It doesn't care about your plans or your pride. By week 11, I felt it in my bones. That morning cup of coffee stopped working its magic. Simple decisions started feeling heavy. The voice in my head got louder. Maybe good enough is good enough? Have you ever hit that point? When the finish line's in sight, but your legs are screaming to stop. I found myself staring at the calendar one night, counting the days until the editorial deadline. 7. Just 7 days to lock everything down before Forbes went to print. The weight of it sat on my chest like a stone. Mark caught me in that moment of doubt. Remember why we started this, he said, dropping a fresh stack of reports on my desk. Your brother's counting on you to quit. That snapped me back. We had one more card to play. A partnership structure we'd been fine-tuning for weeks. Triple-locked contracts, multi-party verification requirements, and financial penalties that would make even a trust fund kid think twice about playing games. Run it by legal again, I told Mark. I want this thing nuclear-proof. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll have them work through the night if needed. The next few days blurred into a single long push. I scheduled our final numbers handoff to Forbes for 5 a.m. on deadline day. Figured we'd use every minute we could squeeze out of the clock. Looking around my office that night, I saw the evidence of our sprint. Empty coffee cups, wrinkled dress shirts hanging on the door, takeout containers from places I couldn't remember ordering from. 3 months of pure grind condensed into physical debris. The cleaning crew had already come and gone. The hallway outside was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of everything we'd built. Will the numbers sing or stutter? I whispered to no one. The empty hallway didn't answer, but the 3 months of proof sitting in my outbox did. Tomorrow would tell us if it was enough. I must have checked those files 30 times before sending them to Forbes. Every chart, every trend line, every single decimal point had to be perfect. You know that feeling when you're about to jump off a high dive? That moment where your toes curl over the edge and your stomach does that little flip? That was me at 4:57 a.m., cursor hovering over the send button. The data pack was massive. 3 months of reconstruction compressed into neat folders and crystal-clear summaries. Mark had stayed up with me, running final verifications, until his eyes were red. It's clean, he said, rubbing his face. Cleaner than most public companies, if we're being honest. I hit send at exactly 5 a.m. The progress bar crept across my screen like it was dragging weights. When it finally hit 100%, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Remember how I told you about those early mornings in my kitchen, back when everything felt solid? This sunrise was different. I couldn't sit still. Couldn't even look at my coffee. Every ping from my phone made my heart jump. But it was never Sarah from Forbes. The city woke up around me while I waited. I watched delivery trucks rumble past my office window. Saw the morning crowd filter into the coffee shop across the street. Time stretched like taffy. You know how it does when you're waiting for news that could change everything. Around 10, Mark dropped by with a stack of routine paperwork. He took one look at me and smiled. Wearing a groove in that floor isn't going to make them move faster, he said. Someone should tell my feet that, I replied, realizing I'd been pacing. Have you ever noticed how silence gets heavier the longer it goes on? By 11, I could practically feel it pressing against my eardrums. I tried reviewing contracts, answering emails, anything to keep my mind occupied. Nothing worked. Then, at 11:42 a.m., my inbox chimed. From Sarah Mitchell. Forbes subject. Locking the cover. My hands weren't quite steady when I clicked open. The mock-up loaded slowly, like it knew exactly how to torture me. Then there it was, me looking straight into the camera, wearing a suit I remembered choosing carefully for the shoot. The headline above my head read, "The Relentless Strategist." You ever have a moment where past and present collide so hard it knocks the wind out of you? Because right then, all I could hear was my brother's voice from that banquet. Unlike him, I'm not worthless. The memory hit like a punch to the gut. But this time it felt different. This time I had an answer. I opened my drafts folder and typed out a short message to my father. Thought you'd want to see tomorrow's issue. Attached the mock-up. Hit send. Mark walked in just as social media started lighting up. Forbes had begun their distribution push. I watched those little status bars ripple across Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Each notification felt like another brick in a wall between then and now. This is really happening, Mark said, leaning against my desk. You actually did it. I was about to answer when my phone lit up. The family group thread. There was my father's number calling. You know that pause before a wave hits? When everything goes quiet and you can feel the water drawing back? That's what it felt like, staring at that incoming call. My thumb hovered over the accept button while my mind raced through every possible version of this conversation. 3 months of work, 3 months of grinding and proving and rebuilding. All of it had led to this moment. And now, the phone kept buzzing in my hand, demanding an answer. I answered that call from my father, but the conversation didn't go how anyone expected. Because right as he started in with his usual defense of my brother, his voice caught. I heard papers rustling in the background. He was looking at something on his other screen. I'll call you back, he said, and hung up. Want to know what he saw? The same thing lighting up every financial news site that morning. While the Forbes cover was making its rounds, a different kind of story was breaking. You see, timing really is everything. I woke up the next day to my phone buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. Headlines everywhere. But it wasn't my Forbes cover making noise anymore. It was the sight of dark suits and government vehicles pulling up outside my brother's office building. Ever watch one of those nature shows where the prey doesn't see the predator until it's too late? That's what it felt like watching the live coverage. Regulators moving with that careful, unhurried confidence of people who already know what they're going to find. I made coffee and settled in at my desk, multiple news feeds running on my monitors. Mark called around 9. It's all clean, he said without preamble. Every document, every timestamp, every transaction record. It's bulletproof. They're working directly from our package. I remembered those late nights with Mark, meticulously building that evidence trail. How, long before they reach the siphoning records? They already have. That's why they moved this morning. There was a pause. Your brother's trying to call me. Let it ring, I said. Through the morning, I watched it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Cameras caught my brother glad-handing security guards like nothing was wrong. That trademark smirk still in place, but you could see it starting to crack around the edges. Remember how I told you, storms reveal structure? Well, this storm was pulling away all the pretty facades, leaving only cold, hard numbers. And numbers, as Mark always says, don't lie. Around noon, my father made his first public statement defending my brother. I could almost recite it before he said it. All that stuff about misunderstandings and context and family legacy. Then a reporter held up bank records that matched our timeline. Perfect matches, down to the minute, of transfer. You know what silence sounds like when someone's whole worldview cracks? I heard it through the TV speakers as my father's words just stopped. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Your brother's counsel just requested an emergency hearing. I switched feeds to catch my brother leaving the building. That swagger was gone now. His eyes kept darting side to side, the way people do when they're calculating odds and not liking the math. The cameras caught every flinch, every tell. Guilt has a way of writing itself across your face when pressure hits. Through it all, I stayed quiet. No statements, no tweets, no calls. I just watched and remembered something my grandfather used to say about patience being its own kind of revenge. He was right. I didn't need to say a word. The process was doing all the talking for me. Late that afternoon, I logged into the court docket portal. Old habit from my early days tracking contract disputes. There it was, fresh on the records. Case number 2023, CV 7741. Right at the top of the new filings. My brother's name looked strange in that legal font, all serif and ceremony. Below it, a list of charges that read like a textbook on financial fraud, each one backed by documents Mark and I had spent months organizing. The sun was setting when Mark called one last time. The next 48 hours, he said. That's their window to respond. After that, the reputation they spent decades building comes down to how they handle the next 2 days. I finished. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights coming on. Somewhere out there, my father was probably staring at those same bank records, seeing for the first time what had been happening right under his nose. And my brother? He was probably sitting with his lawyers, learning the hard way that charm doesn't work on spreadsheets. The headlines kept rolling in. Each one felt like another brick in that wall between past and present, between worthless and whatever came next. I've seen avalanches start with a single stone. By mid-morning, my brother's carefully stacked empire was sliding down the mountain. The first alert hit my phone around 10. His biggest investor had suspended funding pending further investigation. 15 minutes later, another notification. A major vendor putting all orders on hold. My news aggregator kept pinging like a game show scoreboard having a seizure. You ever watch those old-school domino setups? The ones where one tile tips and starts a chain reaction? That's what this felt like. Each notification spawned 3 more. Each withdrawal triggered another pause. Each pending review sparked a fresh round of scrutiny. Mark called just before lunch. "Michael, you seeing this?" "Every bit," I said, scrolling through another batch of alerts. His board just called an emergency session. Word is they're voting on temporary removal. I leaned back in my chair, remembering all those banquet toasts, all that smug certainty. How solid is that? Solid enough that 3 members already leaked their votes. It's not looking good for him. Business outlets were having a field day. The headlines kept morphing. From allegations surface, to records confirm, to pattern established. Every hour brought a new sidebar comparing what my brother had claimed versus what the documents showed. It was like watching a house of cards meet a leaf blower. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. "We need to talk." 2 months ago, those words would have sent me scrambling. Now, I just set the phone aside and kept working. Funny how clear things get when you stop chasing approval and start building proof. The media requests started flooding in around 2. Everyone wanted that quote, that soundbite, that perfect wronged brother speaks moment. I had my assistant forward them all to our compliance team with the same response. "Please refer to the public filings." Mark's update came mid-afternoon. "License suspension just came through. Temporary, but temporary has a way of becoming permanent when the numbers don't add up," I finished. "Exactly. And Michael? That reputation index he was always bragging about? Dropped from industry leader to watch list in under 6 hours. I remembered how my brother used to wave that rating around at family gatherings, like it was some kind of royal decree. Now it was just another domino falling. The sun was setting when I started getting ready for the Forbes launch event. I laid out my best suit, the charcoal one with subtle pinstripes, and took my time with each button, each fold, each detail. In the mirror, I saw a man who'd learned that patience isn't just waiting. It's building while you wait. My phone lit up with another news alert. Board votes 6-1. Interim leadership appointed. Below that, a photo of my brother leaving the emergency session. That familiar smirk finally completely gone. Mark's text came as I was adjusting my tie. "Everything's holding. Every document, every timeline, every trace. They can kick all they want. This wall isn't coming down." I slipped the Forbes advance copy into my briefcase, the one with "The Relentless Strategist" blazing across the cover, and checked my watch. The launch event would start in an hour. The same kind of glittering affair where my brother used to hold court, where my father used to beam with pride at his real success story. But tonight would be different. Tonight, the quiet one, the worthless one, would stand under those lights. Not with speeches or drama or carefully crafted zingers, just with results, with proof, with the same steady discipline that had rebuilt everything they tried to tear down. As I headed for the door, my phone buzzed one last time. Another index downgrade for my brother's ventures. Another domino falling. Another brick in that wall between what they'd claimed and what the evidence proved. I straightened my tie, grabbed my keys, and stepped into the evening air. The city lights were coming on. And somewhere in those glowing towers, a story was about to find its proper ending. Not with a bang or a shout, but with the quiet authority of numbers that didn't lie and books that didn't blur. The Forbes launch was being held at the Grand. One of those places where the chandeliers alone probably cost more than my first office lease. As I walked through the entrance, camera flashes started popping like electrical storms. You know that feeling when you're exactly where you need to be? That's what hit me. Not triumph, just rightness. Sarah Chen, the Forbes editor, met me near the champagne fountain. She looked different from our video calls. Sharper, more focused in person. "Michael," she said, extending her hand. "Ready for this?" I thought about those late-night spreadsheets, the client calls, the slow rebuild. "Thanks for demanding the proof," I told her quietly. "Not just taking my word for it." She nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. Numbers don't lie, neither do patterns. The event staff had set up a signing table with stacks of the magazine. My face stared back from each cover, not smiling, Not frowning, just steady. The headline still got me. The relentless strategist. 3 months ago, I was worthless. Tonight, I was relentless. Funny how things turn. Junior analysts and associates lined up first. These weren't the cocktail crowd my brother used to court. They were spreadsheet warriors, data hounds, the kind who understood that real success leaves a trail. "Sir," one young analyst said, sliding her copy forward, "your reconciliation methods section, that's going in our training manual." That meant more than any headline. While my brother had been buying rounds and trading favors, these people had been studying the work itself. My phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Regulatory freeze just landed. Full board vote confirmed, 6-1 removal. It's done." I set the phone down and kept signing. Another buzz. "Legal team estimates total loss exposure at 8 figures. Reputation index officially marked severe risk." The same chandeliers that had watched my brother's victory laps were now lighting his fall. But the anger I'd carried since that birthday banquet, it was fading. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just dissolving into something calmer. Something that felt more like quiet pride. "Michael." Sarah was back, holding a fresh copy. "They want one more shot. For the digital edition." I stood, straightened my tie, and lifted the magazine. The cover caught the light exactly right. Like it was designed to shine under these specific chandeliers, in this specific moment. The same kind of lights that had burned down on me during Dad's birthday, when Worthless first landed. Cameras clicked, flashes strobed. Someone called for one more. I held the position, feeling the weight of the magazine in my hands. It wasn't heavy, just glossy paper and ink, but it carried something else. Proof. Not the kind you argue about, the kind you verify. The photographer lowered his camera. "Got it. Perfect shot." I set the magazine down and looked out across the room. These lights didn't burn anymore. They just illuminated. Someone thrust a microphone forward. "Mr. Carver, your response to today's developments?" I thought about the banquet, about the smirks and toasts, about spreadsheets and patience and proof, about worth, real worth, and how you measure it. Looking straight into the camera, I said the only thing that needed to stay when all the noise faded. Worthless men never make history. The room went quiet, not the awkward kind of quiet. The kind that happens when truth lands clean. More cameras flashed, more questions flew, but I'd said what needed saying. The rest was just details and documentation. And those were already filed, verified, and bulletproof.